And he was the one of the 5 kids that was very well fixed. Back then, Aunt Anna had married, so she was well taken care of and everything. And Uncle Charlie, I don't remember what he did. He wasn't poor, but he wasn't rich, But Uncle Ran had done very well in the insurance business. And then there were the 2 brothers, the other 2 brothers, Joshua and Sidney, who had come down to Florida to make their fame and fortune, in citrus. And the opportunity arose to buy Bel Air because John Sanford, I guess who was the executor or handling things, appointed my father Chase, the original Sidney Chase, to try to find a buyer for Bel Air after the 1894 freeze. Everything was just desolate here. I'm sure you've heard stories about how landowners were at the train station waving deeds to their land to the engineers saying, I'll trade you for a ticket north. It was just wiped out around here, but the Chase brothers stayed because they recognized the opportunity. And I guess it was John Sanford who put Father Chase in charge of trying to find a buyer for Bel Air. Well, he tried and tried and tried. And nobody was buying because it was a 1,000-acre tract. Approximately 1,000 acres, which included all of that.
Frozen out trees.
Oh, frozen out trees. And who wanted it? Wasn't worth anything. So, the way the story goes, Father Chase approached John Sanford and said, well, I'm even embarrassed to offer you this, but what would you think about maybe selling it to me? The most I could raise would be $1,000. He took it like that.
Okay, this is the April Fool's Day thing. I've always heard that it was on April Fool's Day.
I'd never heard that.
It's in the obituary.
I didn't hear that.
I think it's in Sidney Chase's obituary.
Is that right?
Yeah. It says that John Sanford sent a letter on April 1st saying, make me an offer.
Is that right?
Yeah. I was hoping maybe you had a family story with it because I thought that was great. I thought that was like maybe the Chases thought it was, he was kidding.
Well, he did. What I heard is that he offered it to him just,
for anything.
Fully expecting him not to take it, and then he did.
Okay.
Because there's a document I came across from my Uncle Ran that acknowledges that Father Chase had paid him back $500. Okay. See, Uncle Josh was going to pay $500, and my Father Chase was going to pay $500. And there is a document that says paid in full to Father Chase for his half, and it says for 1/2 share of the debt.
We don't know. We don't have any papers from John Sanford, really. We don't know anything.
Really?
I think the assumption has been over the years that I've picked up was that John Sanford took it off of Gertrude's hands because she needed to get rid of it.
Right.
And that he was a well-to-do man. The New York Sanfords were much better off than this branch of the family. Yeah. And so the assumption, I think, has been is that he just bought it to do his mother-in-law a favor and that he really didn't want it. Now, what you're telling me makes even more sense, is that it became kind of a liability to have this thing
it would
sitting around.
And they needed to raise cash to pay those debts.
So you don't have, the family has no stories that John Sanford was ever down here, really? It was just
doing
this long distance, the Chase brothers were running everything down here?
I don't know.
Okay.
I kind of assumed from the stories that I heard that he was down here.
That's one thing that we don't know.
You don't have any letters?
Not really. We don't. John and Ethel, we don't. They went to upper state New York, and we really know nothing about what happened with them for the most part. This is something we need to get from the remaining Sanford
As you
family.
were coming in the north gate, there was a great big white ugly trailer sitting, trying to be hidden behind a bank of azalea trees. That thing is stuffed full.
Oh, is that the building?
It's not all old. We just bought that old trailer. Dad had a bunch of files that he was paying storage on in one of these you-store-it places. And we took all those out of there and just went and bought a trailer and put them out here. And it's a lot of old Chase and Company records. But there are a lot of older files in there also. And now you know another bunch of folks that I need to get you in touch with. And I don't know the legal status on this about copies of it or actual getting any of the documents, but the University of Florida has a Chase Papers file. I mean, the family, I guess the various branches of the family contributed money, and they, in order to collect these files and then treat them with this chemical, so they're hermetically sealed and whatnot, so they don't disintegrate anymore. And I know there's a bunch of stuff about the celery business in the early 30s. They're very interested in the celery. And like one of the little children from Katie's class was talking about. I thought that was very much.
Well, that's what I was going to ask that, because from what I had read in the obituaries for Joshua and Sydney was that they really, the Chase and Company had been instrumental in starting the celery.
And it was Father Chase's idea to grow celery in the first place, and they had the first experimental little farm out here on the east side of town, and for a while there in the 30s, Sanford was the celery capital of the world.
That's right. Do you have any idea why they decided on celery to begin with, though? Do you have any story as to why? Why celery? I mean, did someone advise him that it was good there, or did he just take it to his head to just try it?
That's a good question. Maybe Dad would know the answer to that.
Because it is kind of strange for it to be so successful. It's like, well, how did they know it was going to be?
Well, they'd always grown cabbage around here, and it's a leafy vegetable, and probably somebody came to him, some farmer came to them and said, hey, I've been growing celery like crazy. Why don't you all consider planting out one of these fields in celery? And somebody had the idea. It probably was a farmer from the area who had success and came to Uncle Josh and Father Chase with the idea, and they picked up on it.
I don't know. I had somebody ask me yesterday who was from Midway, and we have a woman who's doing a survey of black communities in this area. And he was mentioning the fact that he had been told by one of the elders in Midway that the land had been, that the Chase family had owned land where Midway now sits, and that had sold land to some of these people. Do you know, did Chase and Company own that land out there?
Oh, they owned acres and acres of it out there, and they grew celery and cabbage, and
we're trying to find out where Midway came from, the community.
Right.
And it's always been assumed it was an agricultural workers who moved out to this area.
It was an outgrowth of the laborers that were needed to tend those fields.
Because
they would have built their homes right close by to their work, so they wouldn't have to transport them.
When he mentioned that, I thought, well, that may be the explanation. They may have been people who worked for Chase and Company on Chase land, and that this was land that the Chase brothers said, we'll sell you this piece of land. That's what we were wondering when he mentioned that. So that the family did own all that out there.
Oh, yes. Okay. There was a big, the Beardall packing house. One of my very first memories of celery is going out to the packing house and the wonderful smell that celery has when it's fresh picked right off the field and it's on the conveyor belts and it's being spray washed by the water, and it just lets off this smell. It's just marvelous. I can't describe how delicious that smell is. But that was the Beardall packing house. I don't know if it's even still there. There's a big water tower out on, it's either Celery Avenue or Beardall Avenue, and that was right close by to where the packing house was. And it all came, it started out with just mules, horse and buggy and mule-drawn tractors and stuff. It's really primitive farming operations, but, and a lot of these irrigation, Sanford's talking about wanting to close off some of these wells. Did you read about that in the paper? Yeah, they are artesian wells that they found, and they used them to irrigate the fields, and they're just the well, and then they laid in these tiles to just kind of direct the water out into the fields, and then abandoned the fields, and this water is going to waste. It's not. It's going along these channels of these tiled channels that were laid in there, and they want to find those and cap them off because we're losing a lot of groundwater. And I was thinking, somewhere in those old records of Chase and Company, they ought to have maps.
Nobody asked us where there's the public library has a brochure that was put out when they developed the ceramic pipe system. The whatever you're describing to me, that's what it sounds like. There's a brochure. I know we made a photocopy of it. I don't think it had a map in it, but it was put out by, there was a man, now I've forgotten who the man's name was. It was one of the founders of the town who developed a system, and he put out this brochure. And I bet there may be in the Sanford papers, there may be something about the early plans to do that. That would be a good thing. Is this your father behind you here?
Well, look who's here. Hi, Dad. I'm glad you're up.
I think he's only heading that way.
Oh, you're here and there. Okay, great. Well, I'll have you meet Mrs. Clarke another time.
That's all right.
At least that's good. He's having an angina deal this morning.
That's hard.
Oh, it is. It's very hard. Well, I don't. Does the Chamber of Commerce have this brochure?
No, the Public Library does.
Public Library.
We made a photocopy of it. I want to go back. I'll look at it and see if it says anything, because that's one thing that bothers me is that this is why not having a historical society where the things were collected over the years is a problem, because I don't think that contemporary people think in terms of, well, maybe we could go back and find
I know.
a map, you know.
Yes.
There might be a map somewhere. The only question we've had like that was I had someone who was trying to resolve an alleyway next to the middle school, I think. And it turned out I think they finally found out it still belonged to, like, Harriet Boyd's family, or so. It belonged to a family that had lent it to the city. Because, see, the Sanford family did that too, and I'm wondering, there may be land around here that actually still belongs to families that they're not aware of, because
could be.
There was right-of-way for the railroad tracks, there was right-of-way for alleyways and streetcars and things that was actually only given to the city as long as it was used for that purpose. This is the first case I've heard. It was just a couple of months ago where the city had to pay for a little strip of land that had been one of these legal agreements, that it was only for use for, like, the fire department or something like that. And the city wants to have it, so they have to go back and pay the family. A lot of families may not even be aware of the fact that they still own property. I don't know that, see, the Sanfords, it's my understanding that Henry Sanford gave all the land for the right-of-way for the railroad.
Yes, he
Now,
did.
if they should rip up the tracks at some point, I don't know if that means that your family, someone else, owns the right-of-way for the railroad. Because it was my understanding that was only temporary as long as the railroad ran on it. So there's illegal things like that. So we did have that come up. But that's the only instance I've had of someone coming in and saying, we're trying to answer this question. Do you have anything? From originally, that nobody seems to think of that.
Well, now,
because this irrigation system, there's probably is something either in your family's papers or possibly, I'll look in the Sanford papers and see if there's anything. I think mostly the irrigation system is after his death, because that's mostly when they got into the vegetables. That they got into that system.
Yes, indeed.
So I think he was long gone by that.
Well, now, do you have records that I'd just be interested? General Sanford or his family donated the land where Holy Cross.
I can't find anything about Holy Cross.
Is that right? And it seems to me that it was the Methodist Church also, and there was another church that got its land donated.
The way that we're finding that out is because that's not in the papers. What we're finding is when people do deed searches, they come across it. And I think, trying to remember, Tommy Peterson and Al Fitz worked on the little biography of Holy Cross, and I'm trying to remember, it seems to me that they did find the deed for that it was Henry Sanford. But see, we're finding a lot of people, like Altonese Bentley, who lives in Georgetown. Her grandfather worked for Henry Sanford, and a piece of land that her house is sitting on in Georgetown, she has the deed from Henry Sanford that it was sold directly to her father. So we're finding that there's I think there's an AME church in Georgetown that somebody found Henry Sanford had donated. He apparently donated land for a lot of churches, black churches and in the white community. And but he didn't. It doesn't seem to be recorded in his papers.
I see.
It's going to show up in the city papers. And see, one thing that we're trying to do too is work with finding out where all the things are, because I'm afraid a lot of things are just gone. One problem we have is because of the change in county, a lot of things are in Orlando. And work has not been done on going down, finding out. We have a woman right now who, maybe just want you to know about her because she may need some information from your family. Her name is Brenda Elliott. She is with the Orange County Historical Museum down Lock Haven. She is doing this project on the survey of the black communities in Orange County prior to 1913. But in doing that, she's finding all this other information. She'll call me up and she's got some piece of information about the Spear family or about the Sanfords or about something else, because in looking for one piece of information she stumbles across all of the others. So we're getting a lot of good material. So some of this she's passing on to us when she finds a census or a tax roll or anything like that. So I'm hoping to find out more about what is actually there. And we said something about Gainesville, University of Florida, whatever. I'll write and ask if they've got an index that they could give us a copy of just for the Chase papers, so we could know what they had. Did they ever send you all anything telling you how they'd index the papers?
They were supposed to have published an index. And the gal who was heading it up was supposed to have written an introduction. And that's the last I heard of it.
Okay.
Now, my godmother, Sace Lasbury. The Lasburys are the other side of the Chase family. That's Uncle Josh's side. Great Uncle Josh had one daughter, and that's my godmother, Sace, Cecilia Lasbury. And she's still living, and she is quite a lady. She really is. They lived up in Connecticut most of the time. Came down in the winters, came down for board meetings a couple of times a year, that sort of thing. After Uncle Josh had passed on, my godmother Sace would come down a couple of times a year. So they weren't intimate with the day-to-day stuff of Sanford. But, where were we?
Indexing the papers.
Oh, that's right. It was my godmother Sace who really started with this fellow up at the University of Florida to make a Chase Papers file.
Excuse me, Kate. Your husband just called.
My husband.
Yes.
And I will give you, when I get back home, I'll dig that out. There's a very nice fella up there.
Okay.
He's young and vibrant and just a barrel of fun and just so interested in everything. He's been the one who has really directed this whole Chase Papers project up there.
Because
Sam somebody or other, but I'll give you his direct number and whatnot.
For your family, you need to find out whether or not, I don't know what you're going to want to do with these papers, but whether or not you're going to, if that's something that you can maybe just add to, you know, if they've got them well organized, maybe it can just be added on to.
Well, the stuff that directly relates to Sanford, I wanted to stay here in the museum.
I mean, I would like to.
It should. You know, it very much should. The stuff that relates maybe to the agricultural projects that might be of interest to students. I mean, say a student is going to do a project on the history of celery growing. I mean, that would be interesting for them to be able to find it all in one place. But it seems to me that we ought to, there might be some documents that would be applicable to both areas, and that we ought to be able to get copies of that.
The ideal situation is what we have with the Sanford papers. See, there are 55,000 documents. We have the originals. They are right now sitting in a bank because we don't have space to keep them.
Right.
So we're going to have to build a bigger building one way or another. Okay, I mean, it's been talked about for a long time, but something has to be done because we have no space to add other people's things, which we want to do. But they were all microfilmed back in 1960. So see, we also have the microfilm, so we can lend that out. The Tennessee State Archives has that can be used. So if there was some way to arrange, maybe they could microfilm some of the papers that would make them more available. Even if nothing else, if we just have the index and we can tell people who come in and say, look, you want to talk to the University of Florida, it's box 55, and the information you want. That's one thing that infuriates me, is that people come in and we should at least be able to tell them where they can go find the information. So that's one thing we're trying to work on.
I'll get that information for you, for sure. Let's get this out to the car.
I was going to say, don't let me.
And then let me, if you'd like, you could just hop in my Volvo and I'll take you.
I assume these live oak trees have probably been here since Sanford was here.
Yes, they certainly have. Oh, I'll show you one that's so
They're really pretty. Gosh, this is gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
It's so pretty driving back here.
I know. Now this is the old part of the grove up in here. These are all Valencias. And
so this is what a Valencia orange tree looks like. Okay, this is a first for me. Okay. Because that's the one we always talk about with him.
Oh, yeah.
This is something, too, Douglas Stenstrom has mentioned this, is that we really need to, I think, for some reason.
This tree right here, it's already been picked.
Yeah.
But the budwood from this tree came from my great-uncle Josh from California in 1902.
Oh.
That tree is that old. It was frozen back in those 2 killer freezes. They cut it back and it came back again. Now, they haven't taken care of Bel Air as a grove now for years. Since 85, since the freeze.
Big freeze.
We had to cut this beautiful oak here. All of a sudden, within a year, it just went. And I don't know why. I just don't know why, but we had to cut it because it was dangerous. People were driving underneath it, and all of a sudden, my brother thought it might have been. Oh, here's an interesting story. See, this bamboo has been allowed to come back again. They used to cut it back and cut it back. General Sanford introduced
the bamboo.
He was going to make fishing poles.
Well, I see people with big bamboo fishing poles
That's
all the time.
right. He saw the blacks and the other natives who would just take a bamboo pole, and he went, aha, a business. That guy was going to
That's
turn
very
a buck.
much the way, yeah.
Yeah.
What's so sad about it is that he never really hit it on anything. He
I
had great
know.
ideas. I mean, he was always coming
did.
up with something.
He had great ideas.
Or else he had
No, it's
people
just-
giving him great ideas. In some cases, it seems like he kept in touch with a lot of people who had ideas, you know.
Yes.
And then they'd say, "This is a good one, Henry. How about this
Well, it's
one?"
kind of like the Spaniards who founded St. Augustine. They had all these big ideas of all these great wealth that they were going to send back, you know, and it never really panned out. Now here we're up at the north end again. They used this. My aunt used to call this Randall's Folly. It wasn't folly at all. It was just a place to put fertilizer to fertilize all the trees
Well,
out
that
here.
makes sense.
But it was so ugly. It's just, ew, that's ugly. Now these cabbage palms out here, when they were first setting the grove out here, they wanted to cut down these cabbage palms. And Father Chase said, no, you don't. And he didn't, it hadn't been proved, but he just figured that we ought to leave them, they ought to leave them because it might create some wind drainage.
Oh.
Because you don't get as bad a freeze if you have a little bit of air movement.
What is
That's
this?
why
Looks
they
like
have
a
those.
windmill over here.
That's to generate wind movement. They tried those. I don't think they were real successful. But it might just make a difference
But the
of a
idea,
degree
that's
or
the way they
two.
explain it on TV every time we have a freeze now, is if you can just keep the warm currents around the...
That's right. So that's what
Smart
those big
man.
ones are for, and that's why they left those trees. They wanted to cut them all down.
So these would have all been oranges where the
This was
sprinklers
all
are,
huge.
with the palm trees in between.
Uh-huh.
So it would have been all
Yep,
oranges.
they left the palm trees that were standing.
And did Chase and Company just give up when that last freeze, or had he already given up on the citrus around
The
here before?
land was in the process of changing hands. Chase and Company was dissolved. Well, Chase and Company, which sold roofing materials and fertilizer and all that stuff, that was dissolved in 1979. And then Chase Groves was dissolved in 1985. And that was right before that last freeze.
Oh,
It's a good thing,
okay.
too.
Just in
because-
time.
Yeah, it was just in time.
Is there actually...
It's so hard to visualize. This was all just huge, beautiful
Yeah,
old
trees,
trees.
yeah.
Just,
We do get asked a lot now, is there much citrus around here at all anymore? Is anybody trying to grow citrus commercially in
Not commercially.
Seminole County at all?
The only grove that I know of is in Seminole County is that one out on Beardall Avenue that's just so beautiful. You know the one I mean?
No, not right offhand, no. Go out and look for it.
Beardall Avenue. You can see it from the air
Okay.
really easily. There's just now. We are close to the site of the old house. Now this is where John Malloy. Now John Malloy is another really interesting character. You might want to interview him. You know the house that you passed coming in on the
Yes.
north end? That's John Malloy's house.
Okay.
And John Malloy was caretaker of Bel Air for like 40 years. See these two? Beautiful camphor trees. It makes me think that this
Right
might have
there.
been the original site because these are just huge. Now this little house is where John and Catherine lived, and he was caretaker of the grove for all these years, so this is where he was. Now that's that pond down there, the one that's shown on the irrigation map. Right around in there where there's all that growth, right in there, all that greenery coming up. That used to be a quite well-developed pond. I guess it was a drain-off from the other, from the larger lake here.
Just trying to
Go
figure, I'll
around
look
here.
in the picture, on the pictures of the lodge. Now, is this Old Lake Mary Road down here, or
No,
where are we?
that's Old Lake Mary
Okay.
Road out on the
Okay.
east side.
Down
This is
where we
all
are.
wetlands down in
See
here.
these trees again here.
And it seems to me that from
So
what's
you've
been...
also you've got what live oaks, there's a live oak here and there, and the two camphor trees are on the other side.
I'm going to show you something. Dean and I were out here the other day, and we were just wondering because we found some coquina rock up right around in here. That I think belongs Dad has always said it was out in here. Now, it could have
Nobody's
been,
ever found anything, bits and pieces of things on the ground or anything?
It could have been. I think it's kind of junky for you to go through.
Yeah.
But right in here, right up in there, there's a lot of coquina rock on the ground.
Oh, that means
And that's not native. That could have been the remains of a foundation, something like that. Now, when this land all gets sold, sometime very soon, I'm going to be out here, I'll tell you, when their bulldozers are out here. I am going to be Janie on the spot here.
I'll come out with my bucket.
They could come up with old
There's
china.
Well, there's bound to be there ought to be anybody always has had a trash pit, and they always said there would be a
That's
privy
right.
out here.
That's
There'd
right.
be a kitchen out here.
There'd be a separate kitchen building, but this is the area I think it was in.
Okay.
And that could have been a kitchen building back out in here. And then the main house could have been right there with those two great big camphor trees in front of them. It's very, very possible. You have a little. Now, of course, these trees aren't this old. That tree might be that old, but all of this is.
That would be one way to
within 20,
judge if
30
someone
years.
who could identify how old these trees are, because I'd say
Right.
these trees are.
These
are
trees
quite
are
old.
old.
Those are quite old.
And I know those two camphor trees are, if not as old as the one at Dad's.
Well, it's a little peculiar that they're just sitting there by
Right.
themselves.
I know. I
Yeah.
know. It looks like there should have been a walkway right down the middle
Yeah.
of it, you know, and a formal kind of setup which he would have had, wanting to have two like fencing posts kind of.
There ought to be
free.
some explanation of that in his paper somewhere. Saying something about planting camphor trees.
Might have been. And these are fairly large trees also. So this might have been the original site of his house, somewhere right around in this area.
How much? One problem is because of the way trees grow, there's not probably anything I can identify.
No, there wouldn't be. There just wouldn't be. Too much has happened to the land, too, all the freezes and stuff.
Yeah, let me walk around this way and just take one picture going this direction. It does bother me because I'm sure there is stuff sitting in the ground around here. There's bound to be broken pots or something. What is the plan for all of this out there? I mean, we all going to sell it all?
It's all being sold. The deal is pending right now. It probably will close in a matter of months.
Okay.
That all of this will be sold. But we're retaining 37 acres. I'll show you when we get closer back into where Dad's house is. We're retaining the whole area that is around his house where the beautiful oak trees are, and down to the south end it connects with Aunt Julie's private property. So we're retaining about a 37, 38 acre chunk of that land there, withholding it from the deal. But all of this is going to be, well, the expressway is going to come
Now that's
right
something,
through here.
I just had somebody ask me that the other day, and I've never been clear. It is going to come right through this direction then.
It's going to come, it's going to nudge right at the edge of these wetlands
I
here.
think this is going to be apartments and Winn-Dixies and things like that. Henry Sanford would love that.
Finally, his commercial.
Yeah. I mean, I hate the idea of it, but I mean, he would probably love it, you know? That's exactly what he wanted.
Yes, he
Up.
did.
Oh, yeah. He'd be out there building the Winn-Dixie.
You're right. He sure would be. Very true. Very true.
He's kind of a difficult person to deal with for me sometimes because he's a businessman. There's
Yes.
nothing, there's no romantic notions here about this man. He was a businessman.
That's right. That's right. Well, none of them were really romantics back then.
No.
I mean, this was the age of make money and conquer the land, and nobody was a conservationist back then, and nobody particularly loved all the more aesthetic aspects of things. It was just, let's get down here and make a buck.
I hate to think that they're going to still cut down all of these trees, which is what everybody
Oh, boy,
always
if they
says.
cut down those
They'll take the
camphor
camphor
trees,
trees.
really dumb. I mean, that would be the dumbest thing to do.
Yeah, I
can't
see so
imagine
much
doing
of that down here, which just amazes me because the cost of replacing a huge
I know.
tree.
I mean, what?
Go pay a landscaper to come in and bring in a giant twig. It's such a pretty shape the way with the branch
the way they
bending
go
out
like
and
that.
everything. Yeah.
Well, those look like they had been trained also. Originally, when they were young, and then John Malloy probably look at this college. been here for a while.
Yep.
Long time. Look at the size of that trunk. Now, Dad and Mom have two great big holly trees close by to their house, but the trunks on them are about so big, maybe so big.
Do you know where they were planted?
And they were planted when we moved out there in the 50s. So those...
You know, that one's been there for...
Well, how long, who's been living, I mean, have people been living on this site? Whoever works the ground or something out here? Has there been somebody living in a house out here for
I believe
a
so.
long while?
Because
it'd be hard to know.
Somebody lived in down there, but I'm not sure when this particular house was built.
I have no idea. See, I don't know where Mr. Houston and all the people who worked for, you know, I know where the DeForests lived, but I don't know where some of the people who worked this land out here were living. That's one thing we don't have also is I don't have a clear chart of like who was at the top, who were the foremen, who were the people, you know, down the way, because I got a lot of different names. I got Lyman Phelps and Donald Houston and Henry DeForest and then Sidney and Joshua Chase, and then we've got a lot of people. All these names.
Became great friends and great family friends and everything. So that's how Dad originally got tied up with General Sanford and actually got a job out here. But yeah, even with all this letter of introduction business, here he was, just freshly arrived in Florida, a young man of 18. His father had just died. And here he is out here at Bel Air, physically out here at Bel Air, and they had him with a pot of like this creosote stuff, evil-smelling stuff. And his job was to go around and paint all the trees, the base, the bottoms of these, the trunks of these trees against bugs. And they left him out here with this pot of creosote or whatever it was, and the horse and buggy drove away, and he was in the middle of nowhere, and they say he bent down to the ground and put his ear to the ground to hear the last of the horse's hooves go away. He was, you can imagine, desolate. I mean, he was just, he must have just been wondering, what the hell am I doing here, you know?
This could be real lonely out here if this was nothing
Look at
but orange trees as far as the eye can see.
And you're a young man from Philadelphia?
At least from here, I can see over there. You know, I mean, with the trees, you wouldn't be able to see anything.
That's right. You wouldn't be able to see a thing. And here he was down there.
Mosquitoes
and so he'd worked out here for a while, and you know, he was going stir crazy, I guess. And somebody, forget who it was, Dad could remember, some fella, said, "You want to walk to Tampa? Let's go over and walk to Tampa. Do something over there. I forget, look at something." And he said, "Yeah." And they took off and walked to Tampa.
Any idea how long it took them to do that?
I don't know, but he jumped at the chance just to get off and working in the grove. And there's a wonderful account that I'll have to give you a copy of, just for your own pleasure of reading it. I really should send it to the National Geographic. But it's my cousin Charlie Percy's account of the first expedition to the Everglades. You ever heard about this?
No.
Well, my grandfather Chase, this was sponsored by Ingram, because he wanted to find, oh no, not Ingram, it was Plant.
Henry Plant.
Yes, Henry Plant wanted to find a route through the Everglades from the west coast. So, like Flagler was doing the railroads down the east. Well, Plant had the idea that he was going to have a railroad line from Tampa down to Miami along the west coast. So you had to cross the Everglades, and no white man had ever been in the Everglades before and come out to tell the tale. So he mounted an expedition, and there's a list of who all was in the expedition. And my grandfather Chase got to go along as the official photographer, and he had one of Kodak's first box cameras to take his pictures with, and those pictures are now up at the university. And there's an account written by Alfonso Church was his name, of, you know, day to day, watch the end, day to day on this expedition. They almost died. They almost never made it out of there. Here, you know, they're tromping confidently off into the Everglades with their brand new leather boots that were giving them blisters that they finally had to cut out the leather they were, and just totally ill-equipped to go into the Everglades. These guys, you know, they're like great white hunters, not knowing anything about how to survive in the Everglades. The Indians helped them.
That's true to say. I bet in the long run the Indians probably got them out again.
They did, yes. They were just, I mean, they got into the depths of the Everglades. They had no idea how to get themselves out, and they were just totally miserable, of course. But they persevered and got themselves out, and it's a fascinating account. Absolutely marvelous. Very interesting account. I'll have to make you a copy of that. Dad made me a copy of that. So he got to go on that, and just started learning citrus from the ground up. And then that freeze, I suppose, was the break for the Chases, gave him an opportunity to buy land. Of course, they were already in business here. They were selling insurance. They were selling, they were buying up groves as fast as they could. They were starting to broker oranges and from the other growers in the area, and they had an office already in Jacksonville and one in Orlando, one in Sanford, you know, before the freeze happened. So they were very enterprising young men. I think my grandfather had been down here a couple of years, and he wrote Uncle Josh, come on down, you know, there's money to be had here. So Uncle Josh came down. This is a lovely spot in here. It's gotten overgrown so much. When I used to come over vacations, I used to come over here to take pictures. In the morning, the sun rises from the east right over there, and it just filters through this. Oh, it's just so pretty here. It's
You haven't ever found, I found one account, now I think it was Sidney Chase's. We have one little page that's memories of his, of Bel Air. That somebody typed up, and some of this, if you don't have it, we'll get you a copy.
Good.
He said something about there were two, I think, Nile palms at the entrance to Bel Air.
Yes.
That were still there.
There's one that's still there. I'll
Is there
show it to you right
okay.
now.
And then we also have a picture of a century plant with two of the Sanford girls, I think, standing in front of a century plant. There isn't a century plant around here anywhere, is there?
No.
So I thought that's the kind of plant that might survive. Otherwise, he said in the account that there was nothing left of the glorious experimental gardens and I don't know where the pineapple field was. Do you have any idea where that was? He's supposed to have had a pineapple field.
I don't know where the pineapple
but he
field
said
on that
in this
irrigation
account,
map, it just said
It
exotic.
doesn't say. Yeah, it just says rare plants. It doesn't say. Because he apparently had a pinery, I think is what they called it.
Uh-huh.
But in this account, this would have been written back in the 30s, and Sidney Chase says that there's nothing left of it. What?
That tree.
I love these trees. These are the most beautiful trees.
Isn't that gorgeous?
I'd buy a piece of land just to have the tree, I think, down
I
there.
know. I love that tree.
Now that
so
tree
much.
has to have been there too, because that tree's got to be 500 years old.
That's what I would think too.
These are live oak trees. I figure if you're looking at a live oak tree, you're bound to be looking at something that was there.
That's right.
I mean, they're so old. That is gorgeous, the way it spreads out all directions.
Well,
Beautiful treehouse tree. Yeah.
Yes.
It's Swiss Family Robinson or something.
Well, since Dad and Mom moved out here in the mid-50s, they've had the Davy tree people out here every year, twice a year. And we work with them now, and they go around the whole property. See, this will be the north end of Dad's property now.
Okay.
And over there to that line of small trees that we've just transplanted, and all the way down, and he'll still own the lake too.
Yeah, the family will keep this, then you will, so you'll have this tree. Okay.
I just couldn't bear
you know, because
part with it.
Well, to begin with, I don't understand. In Virginia, there are some laws that protect trees. Like
Well,
this.
there should be a law to protect that tree.
And when I've asked, there doesn't seem to be anything in Florida. You know, that a register where you can write the tree down and say this tree can't be cut down. If it is, you pay us a big fine. Or you go to prison.
You're right.
Because Sanford's got some of the prettiest streets in Sanford are where these trees are.
That's right.
Shading over the.
I mean, Park Avenue there.
Yeah, those big trees.
Like that. They're gorgeous.
I hate to think of those vanishing.
Well, the city of Sanford has some rules about that, about cutting down trees of a certain size or certain age, but we're not in the city of Sanford. We're in the county of Seminole.
It's not going to stop anybody from coming out.
Now this.
Oh, this is pretty. Yeah,
this big.
This right here.
Camellia tree is one of the old kind that just have the single petals. I don't know if you can see some of the blossoms.
Yeah,
there are
is that actually an open blossom?
Yes.
Oh.
That is an open blossom. That's right. That's as open as they get.
Interesting.
That's an old tree. That was from down at Alworth. Here is this big camphor tree right there. They say this was there And this is that Nile palm.
Oh, that's it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Right there.
That's the current picture, that one.
Yeah.
It's seen better days.
Yeah, they have that board on there has been 20 years.
Now see, there probably is a photograph of these two trees. I
Now
can't
that
remember.
magnolia tree that was right behind it is also original, and it is about gone. We have tried to save it as much. See how it's rotten at the bottom, that magnolia? But we wanted to save it as long as, especially Dad was alive, so he could look out and see it. But, you know,
I can see
he
it
said
as
it would
well,
cost
yeah.
about as much to save it for another few years as it would to take it down. So we said save it. And, you know, they strung the wire there between the two.
Oh,
and
it'd hold it up.
pruned
No,
it
yeah,
back
it's really
severely.
graced, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So they've
Now, the only thing I was saying, I was going to tell you, if something happens down there, that land, if it looks like those camphor trees are going, give me a call. I'll come out, saw a branch off of it, and we'll make some kind of memorial camphor tree. Okay. that people make out of this tree stood on Henry Sanford. Make little fundraiser things, you know, make paperweights out of it. You know, build another building, buy a piece of Henry Sanford's camphor tree.
Right,
Why
not?
But that's
Oh, and here's something else that was
interesting.
here.
This is
When
still
he was here, they say, this is a cinnamon tree.
Now, see, we do have, you know, there are accounts written of what he had in Bel Air. We've got in the Bel Air papers, there are lists of all the plants that they put in. So I can go back and look and see.
Now,
This is a cinnamon tree?
Look at the size of the trunk. That's what happened in 1985.
Okay.
This thing went right down. They had to just lop it off. Right there. It was huge. It's huge.
I never knew what cinnamon looked like.
And this is the cinnamon tree.
And
We've taken some of the bark off. Matter of fact, I see on this.
Now, is that what we use as cinnamon, as the bark?
This is old. It's dead. I mean, that trunk is so old that you can't smell it. But
But that is what cinnamon comes from, though, is the bark.
That's
Peel
the
bark off.
Yeah, you see the red color in there?
Yeah.
That is cinnamon. This is a cinnamon tree. And it's come back. Nobody ever thought it would, but it has come back. And in another 5 years, this will be, all these guys will be getting thicker, and it will be huge
Does
again.
it blossom? It
And
looks
it
like
just keeps spreading. I've got to
That's part of the same tree?
Yes. These are some of its seeds that
Oh,
are
and these are
sprouting.
blossoms?
This is shrimp plants.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, this is old
That's a good
shrimp plant.
description of it, too.
I know, isn't
It's
it
an
cute?
excellent description of it. Isn't that neat?
Mother
I've never
started
seen
a
one of
shrimp
those
plant
before.
out here, and I can't get rid of it. It's all where I don't want it to be, of course. But these are some sprouts of the cinnamon tree. Excuse me. This two and this two, I've got to get in there and get them out of here.
Well, it certainly is hardy. It certainly is hardy.
It certainly is.
Well, we've had a woman from down at Orange County.
These were the original camellias. Back in, you know, turn of the century, this is what a camellia tree looked like, right here.
Oh, you're holding it.
They didn't have anything
they
like...
hybridized it to the giant
Yes,
blossom?
that's right. That's how they used to look.
That's fine. I had no idea it started something. I've been seeing people who grow camellias into those great big things.
Oh, here's floating water. This tree is not healthy, and I don't know what to do about it. I have tried various things with it, and it's holding its own, but it's not real healthy.
But
There's a big one
just
there.
one row of petals as opposed to the several.
And so I don't think that this was here before they moved out. I think this is a transplant from down at down at Isleworth. The other family grove that was their pride and joy, the jewel in the crown, was Isleworth, which was sold to Arnold Palmer back in '85.
That's where I saw the name in the obituary. And I
Windermere.
thought, where have I heard of that? And that's it. So it is the same thing. That's the Beverly Hills of Orlando now, right?
I know.
Okay, that is the same thing.
And that's where my mom and dad first lived in 1925 when they were first married. There was just a little bungalow there, and they lived there because Dad worked in in the chasing company office there in Orlando. And so he'd come in from Isleworth every day. And then my Aunt Helen and Uncle Frank lived out there all the rest of their lives. But see, all of this was pretty rough out here before they built. And he had the brush removed and the smaller trees removed, so these oaks could grow and get more sunlight and get bigger. So he trimmed some of them, and it smells sweet. It smells so good.
Do you have any feeling for it now? If we were down that way.
That's right. That's where General
That's where I think the lodge was. Mm-hmm. How much further would that have been sitting in the center of the original Bel Air, or was it like off to one side? By comparison, I'm trying to remember where you showed.
It would have been off to one side.
It was kind of off to one side.
The
what
railroad,
you were showing me, most of Bel Air would have been to the north.
Would have been all to the west
this way,
and to the north.
Okay.
Because
he was
of the
down
railroad.
Near the railroad.
And they would have gone in their little horse and buggy and picked him up at the railroad. The railroad, at one point, there was a spur of the railroad that came right through Bel Air, because I've just discovered a whole stack of railroad, not ties, but of the big steel tracks. More things you discover out here. And they just tore them up at one point and then just set them over there and said, well, I'll deal with that. But, you know, there's a lot of steel laying there on the ground. It'd be wonderful for somebody to use it for something, but it's just going to...
Well, it seems to me what I was wondering is it seems like there should have been an avenue of some kind going right from where the railroad was.
There should have been. And is there anything about described about using the lake for any recreation?
There's not
this
really
was
much.
Probably pretty dense.
What we've got to find
here
is somebody else. Once again, somebody else may have written about that.
Right.
One thing is the newspapers from that era. I haven't located now. I'm sure somebody has got them. But the Sanford Journal, which was Henry Sanford's paper, the Sanford Argus, I think it was called, and the Gate City Chronicle.
Yeah.
I've seen one Gate City Chronicle. I've seen one Sanford Journal.
The Herald doesn't have any old files?
Not that I've been able to find. See, the public library has the Herald back to the very beginning. You can find the Herald with no problem, but the early papers, I'm afraid, are like one person has one copy, another person. We've got to find out if anybody at a university somewhere actually has. I don't think there's a whole run. The only thing I've heard is that some of the university collections have a few issues on microfilm. It's one of those papers that doesn't, because that's probably where some of the accounts would be.
Yes, they would be.
Somebody going out to a party, or like when General Grant came, I haven't really read too many real good accounts of the description of, like I didn't know he stayed out here. I figured he stayed in town somewhere.
No, I remember they said he stayed out here. I guess it was Dad who told me that. Where he heard it, I don't know.
Because surely there must have been people out here, recording everything that happened when he came out here, what it looked like.
Well, sure, yes. And this was the hunting lodge. This was where they probably went bird hunting. There would have been foxes around here to hunt. For sure, there's still a fox
here at that time.
What?
There may have been bears around.
There are still some bears.
See bears occasionally?
Yes, I have. We were down by the lake the other day, and I looked down and I said, is that bear dropping? It's not raccoon. And we looked at it, and the berries were there, and everything. Oh, that's bear. And there had been black bear spotted. And no, I have never seen a deer out here. I have seen beautiful red-tailed hawks and big fox squirrels, the ones with the black heads and the great big bushy tails.
Is that what those are called?
Those are called fox squirrels.
I saw one sitting by the side of the road. I was driving down Markham Woods Road. The thing scared. I almost ran off the road because it was this tall. It looked like a prairie dog or something. It has a black splotch on its head.
Yes,
my sister thought they were mutant squirrels. She's been saying, oh, there's something that must have gotten into some kind of thing and they've grown huge. And it's called a fox squirrel.
Fox squirrels.
Thank you. I will pass that on to her because that's a big animal.
That I consider our mascots for out here because they are so funny. They'll sit right in the middle of the road like this, and you have to say, it's like, what's that password? They won't move. They're so tame out here. And then you'll see them taking off oranges for their lunch. They'll have a whole orange in their mouths, and they're going up. They eat them for lunch. I know. But I've never seen a deer out here. And I don't know why. Well, I guess it's because of the grove. The grove is not the right atmosphere
They may
for
never.
deer.
They may have run off a long time ago, gone somewhere else.
A long time ago, probably.
There are springs and other things around here they probably can find.
You see, there'll be a wall here, and that's also why we
cut off the
transplanted
land.
these citrus trees, so
Okay.
there'll be a privacy blind for us out here, too.
So basically, you're selling right about where I see these plants set out. Is that about the end of what
Yeah,
you're
right
gonna
where
keep?
the brown gray stuff
Okay.
is, the
That's- yeah,
frozen
right.
weeds. What used to be the grove out there, that will now be houses. And I'm sure it's going to upset my dad terribly when they actually do start. But
Well,
the
some of
same
these, like,
thing.
maybe it will take a while. I mean, some of these
Hopefully it will
things,
take a while.
Some of these things, are, you know, people clear off the land. It looks like they're going to do something, and now I've been here a year and a half, and I go past places that they've not done anything.
Oh, I know.
I mean,
They
Lake
get
Mary,
tied up
I
in
know,
their
changes
financing
every,
and they.
yeah.
Yep.
On this side of Lake Mary, maybe it will take a while longer.
So I think that and that and that magnolia tree and the cinnamon tree are, and that great big live oak,
Main
and maybe
things.
some of the other live oaks were here. But Mom used to always tell me, this is where General Sanford was going to build when he retired. She always told me that, and that's why he
this side
planted.
here? Oh.
That's why he planted these trees in this area.
Okay.
Isn't that beautiful, the way that
Yes,
tree goes
right
right
over
there?
that house.
Now this, we have left this. That's another original, that date palm.
Oh, let me get
That was a date palm. I forgot about that.
But you think basically y'all's house is sitting more or less where he was going to build, that this would have been like a drive? Well, if there was another one of these trees, maybe this road right here, that would have been coming up from the railroad station, so the house would end up here.
It could have been he planned it somewhere in here,
there.
because the lake would have been much bigger then, and
Yeah.
he would want to have had it. I would have wanted to have it close to the lake. Now you might get a good shot of it like this. And it fell off. The top of that fell off about a year ago in one of the big, I think it was.